Hi, it's me, Antoinette. Today, what's on my mind is not necessarily the most philosophical topic, but it is because it's about judging things that you don't agree with. I'm a movie buff. I love movies. I have for a very long time. I like all of them. Not every single movie, but movies of all kinds from every genre. And Martin Scorsese, a while back, out of the blue, decided to attack Marvel films and basically blame them for the decline in cinema, basically saying they're not cinema. But also, he led us to believe that he hasn't really watched any. Like, he tried, but he couldn't do it. That's a problem. Okay, so he has the right to his opinion, but it's still odd for somebody who archives films and is so concerned with the history of film to just say, oh, here's this whole group of films, and he views them as kind of worthless. So, next thing you know, his friend Francis Ford Coppola, who was always my favorite director, backs him up by calling these movies despicable. Now, despicable, I don't know why people choose words like despicable and deplorable. Those are only insulting. So you mean to insult when you use them. So they decided they were going to put up a unified front against these horrible, evil Marvel movies that are making everyone stupid somehow. Okay, it dies down. Out of the blue, yesterday, Martin Scorsese decides he's going to double down and he writes an op-ed in the New York Times to explain himself. He didn't need to explain himself. Nobody asked him. We know he doesn't like them. And he thinks that anybody who does is kind of dim. But his explanation doesn't explain anything. He's just telling you why he's right and why the people are being systematically fed this pablum of these movies that are not hard and they don't have emotion and there's no risk and all the stuff he said. But in actuality, these movies are good. Those of us who watch these movies are good. And what he's doing and what he did in the first place and what the problem really is he is judging the people who watch superhero movies. He is assuming, or he's got it in his head, that the film studios and the distribution companies are feeding us films that are going to make us not able to appreciate what he considers artistic films. Now, I'm sorry, as a little kid, I think I was about 4 years old when I saw Star Wars. That was like the second big blockbuster after Jaws. And I grew up watching those films, and I watched Rocky, and I watched all the Stallone films, and I watched Schwarzenegger. I watched blockbuster after blockbuster after blockbuster. I watched those in the theater. At the same movie theater I've been watching most of these movies right now. I've been a film fan my whole life. Movies like Taxi Driver, I saw on TV. The Godfather, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, I saw on TV. All of these smaller films, these artistic films, a lot of these well-respected films, I saw on TV. Not necessarily because they didn't play by me, because I was a baby when they were in the theater. And as a growing film buff, when I was in high school, my favorite channel was Turner Classic Movies, where I watched the old movies with Edward G. Robinson. I watched Vincent Price movies. I became a film fan by watching movies on television. Now, here we have a situation where not that long ago, Steven Spielberg came out against Netflix and that those aren't movies. And here you have Martin Scorsese with a Netflix film lambasting superhero movies. And this snobbery, or whatever it is, in my opinion, is just about trying to say, no, we are the respected film directors. We get to decide that only a certain kind of film is the best. And that's because that's where they live. And they don't make superhero movies. And in the case of Steven Spielberg, he doesn't want to make a movie on TV or Netflix. So it's all about their approval and what they think, and they think they're right. And I'm not saying that they're not great directors. They are, obviously. But to insist that somehow the people who only get to see superhero blockbuster movies in the theater are never going to watch foreign films, or it's ridiculous. In my own experience, I grew as a movie buff watching these things on cable, on TV. I learned to watch French films mostly through Netflix. I didn't have access to them. I live in the United States. It's not because it's 2019. In 2010, in 2000, in 1989, they didn't play French films where I live. I would have never seen those. I was able to watch all these things on the small screen. So this whole idea that the movies that are being put out there, these Avengers movies, aren't art, which is ridiculous, or that somehow the studios only getting those to play in the multiplexes are somehow dumbing down people, and it's not cinema. It doesn't make sense, because most of us who became film fans, who are of a certain age, who did not live in a major city, and not that many people live in a major city, they grew up watching whatever, Kurosawa, Bergman, on video. We did not have access at any point to see these movies. So as someone from, I don't know if he's from Little Italy or Hell's Kitchen, he's from New York City, he always had access. And if he now feels like he can't watch the movies in New York City, well, that's a different thing. But most of us in the rest of the world did not watch the great film directors in a movie theater. A director I had never heard of, that I only found through Netflix, is Rainer Werner Fassbinder. I think he's great, and I only knew of him obviously years after his death, but it was Netflix that introduced me to him. It's not I went to film school and I saw his movies. It didn't happen. It didn't happen now. It didn't happen years ago. People, it's been like this. It's been like this. So his whole attack, I believe it's false. I believe he's just trying to separate himself, and Spielberg was doing this. They're trying to separate themselves from superhero movies because they're afraid that the awards will start going to them and people will start considering them art. And they won't say, well, your movie is better because you're Scorsese or because you're Spielberg. They are going to feel like they need to compete with these movies that everyone else saw, and they're afraid that they won't be able to. And they think it's going to be because we're stupid. And if somebody says, you know what? Avengers Endgame was my favorite movie of 2019, not The Irishman. They're not going to say maybe that person has a valid point. They're going to say, oh, they obviously don't know any better because of all the movies they've been spoon-fed over these years that have dumbed them down, and that's the problem. Maybe your movie isn't better than Avengers Endgame. It could be. I haven't seen it yet, but I don't talk about movies I haven't seen, which is the biggest problem of all. He is complaining about these Marvel movies, and it's clear he cannot stomach watching them in the first place. So how can you comment on something you haven't watched? Years ago, when the Last Temptation of Christ was in theaters, it was so controversial. The Catholic Church was telling people, you cannot go see this movie because you will go to hell. And at the time, most thinking people were like, hey, did you watch the movie? Did you really hate it? Is it really that bad? And a lot of people who were telling you can't see this movie, it's blasphemous or whatever, hadn't seen it. And the argument was the time, well, how can you judge a movie that you haven't seen? And that's the basic problem right here with Scorsese. He can have his opinion, right? But you have to watch it. If you don't watch it, how can you have an opinion? And then how can you judge the opinions of the people who have watched those films and have loved those films? Because you know what? Most of us, all us fanboys and fangirls who love superhero movies and genre pictures, we've seen all your movies, Martin Scorsese. We did not miss those. And if we like superhero movies better, or we don't, that's going to be our opinion too. So respect it, and don't tell yourself that we're dumb or we don't know art, or that we'll never be able to find some classic film like, I don't know, Ingmar Bergman from Wild Strawberries, or we'll find them. We always do, because we love film, and sometimes it's Star Wars that got us involved, or it's Jaws, or it's Rocky, and maybe it'll be Endgame. You don't know.